opportunity there is unbelievable. If you have got an authority site, or you can buy pages on them, or you can build pages on them, then that will just immediately outrank whatever DR30 blog that you have, or DR30 casino site, or whatever it is. Even if the intent of the SERP doesn't actually match, you can still rank pages. It's an algorithm. So relevancy is linear, literally. And generally speaking, it's very weird.
A lot of people think too much of relevance and trying to hyper focus on it, and I think you can be slightly looser, but
if you want to repurpose your domain, there's 3 things you kind of have to do. A lot of people mess it up completely and don't do it properly at all. But there's some really good examples in iGaming of entire SERPs that are just completely taken over by expired and repurposed domains, basically. You can use Google operators to go and find the stuff that people are hiding.
And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes I see people who have these assets. These guys are super slick at how they've done it. Like, I'll give you a quick example. You can build a PBN for 200 quid, you know.
There's that level of where your brand could be so damaged that you are exposing your customers to having their accounts being hacked and credentials being stolen, right? So there's definitely some system that probably wasn't in the algorithm attribute leaks, which causes virality factors, right?
Hello, this is Otis Podcast. My name is Aneta Samtov, and I'm very excited for today's conversation because we're talking just Black Hat SEO with Craig Campbell and Charles Floate. Hi, guys.
Thank you for having us. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for having me as well.
Thank you so much for coming. I'm super excited for this conversation. But today we're going to talk about iGaming. I would like to focus on iGaming and just Black Hat. So why don't we start with just saying what's special or so different about iGaming as a vertical?
Yeah, so iGaming in general, I think, is different because of multiple reasons. Number one, it's probably legal issues. So just the amount of different jurisdictions, the amount of different paperwork and filings, all this kind of thing, right? I have a client that is an operator in multiple different continents, and they are currently trying to operate in Brazil. And it is very, very difficult to get all the paperwork and everything filed in Brazil, and they're currently having some issues with the court systems and things and stuff. I think that kind of extrapolates across the world, where if you're doing licensed iGaming operators, which you should be doing, you should make sure that you are obviously sorting out all that paperwork thing, and it's just very difficult. The second thing is probably it's very high EPC, so high earnings per click, which is some industries, you know, like video games, for example, the EPC is sometimes less than a cent per click, right? So in iGaming, it can go upwards of $100, which is absolutely insane for like high roller pages and things, which is crazy high, and probably the highest in the world realistically. And then the third thing is the competitiveness. So the competitiveness, because obviously the earnings are so high, because the people, because the different geos and stuff have all these different regulations and things, and because it's so profitable for people, the competitiveness and the innovation, especially in the SEO space, generally iGaming is at the forefront, especially when it comes to Black Hat innovation and things. I've learned a lot just from studying iGaming SERPs and then extracting and reverse engineering tactics, techniques and things that they're doing, and then putting that into my own work. So generally, if I'm looking at a SERP to go into and look at who is the best SEO in the world, 9 out of 10 of those SERPs are going to be casino related.
Yeah, I think I would agree with pretty much all Charles has said there. You know, I think the exciting or the thing that I would say about iGaming is the level of competitiveness. You know, the guys have real budget to do real things and do it in such a massive scale. And I've always enjoyed seeing what people are up to, the tactics that they're employing. And you know, people talk about whether this, that, or the next thing helps rank. You know, if you're doing it in a much cleaner niche, you know, for plumbers or whatever, you know, you don't have to go in with the same level of aggression. But the guys you're up against are absolute monsters, is all I can say. And anything that can be manipulated in any way, shape, or form, even things that you just wouldn't believe, you know, it happens in that space. And it's always fun and interesting to see. Like Charles says, innovation, you know, people are just always doing something different. And you're always talking to someone, you're like, geez, you know, I never even thought of this or that. And, you know, if you can steal little bits of that and add it to what you do, you know, there's big money there. But where there's money, there's always going to be competition. And a lot of people enter this space and they don't have the right budget, or they don't have someone with the right experience, you know, doing all of these kind of things. And that's where there's always going to be room to fail. So you've got to, be prepared for it. And a lot of people come in and they think that, their PR or their general guest posts and stuff like that are going to be enough to pop them right up there. I mean, you've got another thing coming if you think that's the case.
Yeah. And Brazil is an interesting market, right? Wasn't it recently regulated?
Yes, exactly. Which is currently why they're struggling, because you have to go through all this new paperwork. The government there doesn't even understand it. And good luck having you understand it when the people who wrote it don't really understand it. So it's a pretty big struggle. And I know a lot of operators are trying to get there. And we work with several of the biggest operators in the world, and all of them are struggling to get into that geo. So I think it is probably a poor implementation of regulation in the first place, and more on sort of the government. But the opportunity there is unbelievable. It's massive. It really is.
It's a huge country.
Yes, it is. And a lot of the wealth, I think, isn't reported necessarily in Brazil, which means that you have got people that aren't on paper worth what they can be worth to you. So there's some serious opportunities, some serious players, obviously, in iGaming out there. And I think that Brazil is an up-and-coming, or probably the number one up-and-coming market, maybe in competition with Japan and a couple other places as well.
Interesting. But for someone who just wants to get into iGaming, let's say has good, solid understanding of SEO, but wants to develop more and join that difficult niche, what kind of markets would you recommend starting in?
I would always go with the local market, right? So it depends on where they're based, what languages they speak, all those kind of things, because that's an immediate advantage. So if you can locally speak, Greek or some language like that in these specific geos, you are going to have advantages over SEOs that don't, and that they can't compete in the same things, and they're going to have to use AI to transcribe outreach emails and things like that and stuff. So there's all sorts of issues related to actually knowing the geo, understanding the local language, understanding local regulations, understanding all these things that give you an advantage. And if you don't have those things in place and you're just starting out moving into this very competitive industry, you've got to do all this work first before you can get here. So I would try and put yourself in an advantage over other people that are trying to come into that market that don't have that local experience and capability.
I think I've seen people go after things like the Spanish-speaking American market, for example. That 25% of people who stay in America speak Spanish. So you've kind of got to find a niche within a niche. You can't blindly just go out there and say, do you know what, I'm going to go and target America, for example, where it's competitive. If you're new to it and you don't have big, deep pockets, you're going to struggle. So you need to try and niche down, if that makes sense, and try and find, like Charles says, some kind of leverage that you've got over other people. Like, I don't know how many languages Charles speaks, but I certainly only speak one language, and that I am always at a disadvantage. Whereas if you speak Polish or Spanish or whatever, then you've got to leverage that as well. What have you got that a lot of these other guys don't? And always got to try and find an angle into it. It's the same as coming into the SEO space. You can't just come in to SEO and just dominate the world. You've got to find your niche or your country, and even if it's countries that are less competitive and stuff like that as well, you've always got to be looking for some way to get in and leverage something that you've got that's different from Charles. There's no point in going toe to toe if he's got more money than me, and what's the point? I need to find something I've got that he hasn't, and that's kind of my mindset on it.
Great. Yeah, true. So I want to talk more about international SEO in the context of gaming, but a little bit later. First, I would like to get into more black hat techniques. So let's start with, what is the most trendy black hat SEO tactic currently?
I'd say parasite SEO, probably, to be fair. It's just been the number one trending thing for like the last 2 years or so. Generally speaking, because Google's algorithm has been almost linear in its progression with links and authority and things like that, and it's literally just going to at some point in the next few years just be big brands and large authority sites and stuff in the SERPs, because Google is relying on links and authority and things for everything from trust, anti-spam, rank, all these kind of things to validate and authenticate the business and things, right, within the EEAT framework, which I dislike saying that word even.
Yeah.
But I would say that it's generally kind of parasite SEO focused, because Google has just put so much leverage on authority that it means that if you have got an authority site, or you can buy pages on them, or you can build pages on them, then that will just immediately outrank whatever DR30 blog that you have, or DR30 casino site, or whatever it is. Even if the intent of the SERP doesn't actually match, you can still rank pages. Like if you look at things like insurance comparison, Forbes dominates right now, and they got hit and now they're back for Forbes Advisor, and the whole rest of the SERP, none of them are articles, right? They're all like comparison sites and things like that. Forbes is the only article ranking, and that's purely because of their authority. So again, it's parasite SEO for me. I would also kind of say that, to be fair, over the last few years as well, buying links has had just a massive resurgence. Like Google actually, I think, did a fairly decent job of trying to leverage links and trying to make them more neutral. And then because of authority going like this, and because of domain power and things going like this, then links have just become the go-to again. So they kind of started to drop off a little bit, and now they're just at all-time highs basically. And some of the iGaming agencies and operators and things out there are spending upwards of hundreds of thousands of dollars per month on links for maybe even just one domain.
Yeah, I think, on top of what Charles is saying, I would absolutely agree with the parasite thing, and even trying to protect your brand as well, because other people will go after your brand as well, and you can obviously leverage parasite to make sure that your brand dominates for its brand. But that's one thing. But I would agree, PBNs, which we've always loved, I see a lot more iGaming people leveraging that, because again, anyone can buy a guest post. You have to be doing something that's better or different than what the next guy is. And PBNs and stuff like that, people are spending a fortune on it and leveraging all of that kind of stuff. Whether you've got to create assets that someone else can't get their dirty hands on, and obviously everyone can do parasite, they can do buying guest posts, they can do this, that, and the next thing. But again, you need to also add in other things. And for me, going down the PBN route and taking full advantage of that is something that I've always enjoyed, the PBN route anyway, but I think it's coming back. People are always like, oh, PBNs are dead, they're not great and all that stuff. But I now see, Google obviously look at topical relevance, and that is obviously something that they deem quite important. And you can obviously get something that's topically relevant and powerful and do whatever you wish with it as well, and give it some more power. So I would throw that in as well.
And you can reuse them as well, which is the best part. You buy one link, you get one link.
Yeah.
You build a PBN, you have unlimited links theoretically, right?
Exactly. I mean, it goes hand in hand with links, right? It's another way to boost authority.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But coming back to parasite SEO, so for example, can you rank multiple posts with the on the same topic with the same keyword, so that you can populate the SERPs?
Yep, that's the main aim. Yeah, to dominate the SERP basically.
Yeah, just with the same parasite site, right?
So this you can rank two pages from the same domain. So Google. So before it used to be one. You could only rank one page, and then I think about 2 years ago, one of the algorithm updates basically allowed you to rank multiple keywords, or multiple pages, sorry, for the same keyword. And there was a couple of big examples where even 3 pages from the same website were ranking same thing. Ahrefs had an example of that actually, where they were ranking for free SEO tools with 2 pages in Google. And that has become more and more of a thing. But I would still recommend focusing on trying to get different pages, because it's also somewhat volatile. So whenever the next update comes around, if you have 10 different pages on 10 different domains, then they will bounce between each other. If you have it all in the same domain and that domain goes down, then all the pages go down. So you want to make sure that it's kind of split across all of these different pages, so that you can have as much of a chance of the next time it's volatile in the SERPs, which at the moment is all the time, right? you have a chance of one of those pages being ranked 1 for all times, basically.
Okay. And how do you actually take advantage of viral traffic on platforms like Medium, like Reddit? What are your strategies?
I mean, again, you're using these platforms because they're so powerful. They're very, very powerful platforms. So you've got to think about how you're going to drive traffic to that. So you've obviously got to do your keyword research, make sure that the article ranks well for that, and drive traffic to the products. It's simple and easy. But the main goal is you're leveraging the power of Reddit or whatever it may be that you choose to do your parasite SEO on. But you've got to go in and make that convert. It's all good and well, throwing any old crap up there, but the keyword's got to generate traffic. Well, that's the main goal, or protect your brand, either way. So there's no real, I know there arguably is a strategy behind it, but it's not that complex. You've got to do your keyword research, and you've got to make sure that article goes with a view of either educating and has a call to action on it if you want the people to then go and take action. So just simple, same way you would have any page on your website, really. It's designed to push people to go to where you need them to go to.
Yeah, we use it really only for one thing, which is validating link velocity. So we use it as basically Google has got something baked into the algorithm, and it wasn't in the algorithm leaks, to be fair, because I looked through every single attribute in the algorithm leaks. But there's definitely some system that probably wasn't in the algorithm attribute leaks, which causes virality factors, right? So if you have a blog post that goes completely viral in an industry, Google's not going to de-rank that because suddenly it gets 1,000 links in a day.
Yeah.
If a normal page with no traffic got 1,000 links in a day, that page is going to tank, right?
Yeah.
So they have some room and some space to allow that to happen. And generally speaking, it's from traffic. So we try and, if we're being really aggressive with link velocity, building 20 plus links a day sometimes, and that's, guest posts, niche edits, those kind of thing for sometimes a new site, then we'll use that traffic to try and offset some of those links so that it looks more natural and that it looks like it's gone viral, so that it can attract those links organically, even though, again, it's just kind of showing Google that it's natural when it's not.
Yeah, exactly. That was my question about the link velocity, that you should be careful with that, right?
Yes.
It's like a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Can you give any tips what to be wary about?
Yeah, well, with link velocity, it's offset again, not just by traffic, but the types of links. So if you went and built 100 guest posts at your new site in the same day, and you didn't have the virality kind of traffic to build with it, then that site will probably tank. But if you built 100 citations at a local business in the same day, that business will probably go up in Google Maps rankings, right? So it does depend on the type of links you're building. It depends on how many pages you're building them at, right? If I'm building 20 links a day, but they're at 20 different pages every single day, that's okay. If I'm building 20 links a day at the same page every single day, that page is going to tank, right? It doesn't matter how good the links are. Eventually, that you're just building too many at a high velocity rate. And then the final thing as well is the domain and kind of power and things and the size of the domain. If we're building on Forbes, right, we can build however many links we want. But if we're building on some little mom and pop kind of shop that they have for selling, knitwear or something, then that we've got to be very careful about how many links we're going to be building at that site, right? Maybe one a day is the limit with that.
You've got to keep it looking natural. You've got to use common sense with it. You can't just throw something where you go, well, that clearly looks fake.
Yeah, how do you make it look natural when it's not?
Like Charles says, Google have, social media traffic, for example, has the potential to go viral. So, when we do viral traffic, you're going to make that look like it came from social media. But again, you also don't want to overload it or whatever, and make it too crazy. So sometimes you would build up to it and stuff like that as well. You're not just going to go from 0 to, 100,000 hits a day or something like that. That's just not realistic. And also there's got to be a reason why that stuff potentially went viral as well. So you've just got to make sure that all of the kind of footprints, there is a reason for something to go viral. You've got to make it look like that. You can't just go bang, there's, switch on all of this kind of traffic and you've not done anything. Life doesn't work like that. So you've got to make it look real and leave kind of real footprints. And like Charles says, even if you're doing citations or you're doing other bits and bobs as well, things have the potential to move. But yeah.
Yes, since link velocity is such a powerful signal and you have to be careful with it, I heard stories it can be weaponized against your competition, especially in iGaming. with tactics where you can link to someone's website, a lot of links, and then, for example, just drop them and tank their site. What other negative SEO tactics with link velocity have you seen, and how to protect against that?
With link velocity, it's always just spam, basically. You just or there's actually three things: spam, hacked sites where Google has put the hacked mark on it, and then they build links on it, and then the third one is using penalized sites. So it's basically sites that Google has already hit, and then you redirect those at a competitor or something like that. Normally, negative SEO is actually pretty hard to pull off, and realistically, all of those tactics could actually boost your competitor, as well as the fact that it could be negative. So we tend to stay away from that style of negative SEO. There's other styles that work very, very well. CTR manipulation and things like that. It's really good for negative SEO, but it's only temporary. So you can spam, 100% CTR clicks from bots at a page, and that page will generally tank, but it will only tank for however long that you're spamming the CTR bots for. So maybe a few days you get the ghosting effect afterwards that does it. But generally speaking, it's negative SEO is difficult, and sometimes, like I said, it can boost your competitors. So as a result, it's not normally worth spending the time and resources to do it unless you know what you're doing.
And also the cost of doing that, like let's say you do the CTR thing, the cost of sending that traffic to someone full time, I mean, it probably costs you as much, if not more, than actually focusing on your own website. So I think you've got to weigh that up. What's the point in spending all of that time just to do that? There's going to be multiple other competitors that are going to run away with the money. You've got to focus on your own project rather than damaging other people's websites.
But you have to still protect your brand against that, right? Because that can happen. How do you approach monitoring and being aware of what's happening?
Yeah, so SERP alerts, number one thing, right? If anything changes, then you get the notification the same day. The second thing, parasite SEO, just to protect the actual brand. So ranking pages and things in there is really powerful. And then protecting your brand is actually a difficult thing to do in SEO because of Google's things like freshness and things like this and stuff that can come into SERP. They have got better entities and kind of ranking, making sure that it's only that entity ranking. But we're currently in Vietnam. There's a really good example in Vietnam at the moment of technically casinos are not legal in Vietnam, let's put it that way. But the number one casino in Vietnam ranks obviously quite well. And their brand name is massive in Vietnam. It has like about 1 million searches a month, maybe 1.5 million searches a month. It's huge. And as a result, there's hackers that have come into their SERP and are ranking expired domains and parasite posts and these kind of things that actually they're fake sites. So that when the users log into these fake sites, it steals their credentials and withdraws their money from their bank balance and things and stuff like that. So there's that level of where your brand could be so damaged that you are exposing your customers to having their accounts being hacked and credentials being stolen, right? So that's on the extreme end where you could be really damaging not only your brand, but you could be potentially at fault, like legally responsible and things and stuff.
Exactly.
So there's all sorts of things.
It's not just about SERPs and rankings. It's just as much about the reputation.
100%. Like if your account gets hacked on that website and it comes out that this website has experienced a breach or something like that, you will end up with negative reviews. You will have 1-star reviews from people constantly flooding your site because you've got them hacked, right? And you see that all the time with some of the big sites that get hacked and things and they get exposed. And that is damaging. Like you see their reviews tank from 4.4, 4.6, something like that to 3.1 or something like that. And people read those reviews. They take those things seriously. Even though Google reviews, TripAdvisor, Trustpilot, all these things are easy to manipulate, and they are easy to manipulate, to be fair, especially if you have budget. Users don't really know that. So users, when they see a Google review for a restaurant with 2 stars, they don't go to that restaurant, right? Sure. So as a result, that can be very, very damaging. So you have to try and just protect it multiple layers. And the first thing would be SERP protection and making sure that you have got, or at least you control the top 5 results for your own brand, your social profiles, your press releases, things like that can help with it. But it's getting harder. And I think Google's doing a pretty bad job, especially in international markets. So outside of the US, UK, things like that. As I just said, this place is a prime example of that.
Yeah, don't fancy having a shot at gambling here now.
Do you want to add something, Craig?
I don't know if there's much else I can add other than that, but I think Charles is right. If I'm gambling in Charles's casino and then somehow I sign up and I get my account emptied, I'm not going back to that casino. I'll be like, fuck Charles's casino. I'm not going back there. So I do think you have to protect against that. And again, where there's money, there's going to be competition, and not always good competition. People are doing very, very unethical things to take or steal or damage you or and it's probably a combination of all of that, and that is the nature of this space. It's dog eat dog, and like I say, some of the people, when I say monsters, I was probably being polite earlier, and that you're up against, but they're savage, and you've just got to try your best to protect against that, and make sure that you do check everything out the best you can. But even I've had friends who work in the iGaming space who sell viral traffic, for example, and they were at a conference, Sigma, and people were just DDoSing their website so that when they're at the conference, no one could see their website, just so that they don't make sales, and so that someone else can make sales. It's like the Wild West sometimes, and sometimes that can be fun because, again, you see just ideas and creativity and stuff, but obviously some of this stuff's borderline illegal as well. Well, it is illegal to take other people's credentials and empty their account. But yeah, so I think you've got to be aware that you're not just fighting with, and you can go crying to Google or whatever. Some of these guys can go unknown. That is the level of fight that you've got on, and if you're not prepared for it, you better get someone in your team that knows how to defend against that type of thing, or knows how to analyze and watch for that type of thing.
Yeah. I think a good explanation would also be like boxing. It's like having weighted gloves versus not, like it's a pretty big advantage.
Yes. So yeah, like you mentioned, there are things you can do, like populate the SERPs, but once such attack happens and your review stunk, like how do you rebuild reputation after such attack?
It's an initial response, 100%. You have to be honest and upfront with your customers, and make sure that you are in some way making them whole again. If that means that you have to give them the credit back on their balance when they've been hacked and things, so be it, kind of thing, right? But a lot of companies, that decision is up here and the SEO guys here, right? So it's very, very difficult for the marketing managers and the SEOs and things because they don't have the control to be able to go out and respond properly to a situation like that. And you see it all the time with some of the big corporations and stuff responding very poorly. In some cases, it happened a lot with the what's it called? The ransomware attacks. I don't know if you saw those. They're becoming more popular, but they were very popular a few years ago, where basically they'll infect your computer with a virus and then they'll encrypt your computer, and you have to pay them to decrypt your computer to get your stuff back. And it's happened to children's hospitals, it's happened to doctors' clinics, to insurance companies, to banks, to all of these kind of companies. And that's a really good example of where a lot of those companies completely messed up how they responded to that. Some of them paid the ransomware, which is completely stupid. Like, you never want to pay, you don't pay those people because then they come back and do it again, right? Yeah. And generally speaking, if your security didn't fix it in the first place or let that hole open, then there's going to be other holes there because you don't have the correct people in that department. And cybersecurity, I think, is a really good industry as an example of that, because that happens on a daily basis to companies. And you see their responses are really bad. I think when it comes to the kind of fallout afterwards, you also have to share what you've done to stop it happening again, right? You have to be like, okay, we've implemented this system, we've changed this system, we've changed this person, we've done all these kind of things, and just be open and transparent, because again, if you've been hacked in the casino, they're not going to come back otherwise. And some players will come back because they believe in you and they believe your brand and you've done the right thing and you've done all that kind of stuff. But again, 9% of companies completely mess up their response and how they deal with that situation. And the other side of it is, don't let it happen in the first place, right? So like, employ good cybersecurity people, like invest in this kind of thing and stuff. And there's been, again, numerous cases of people getting into those situations because they hired the wrong company or they hired the wrong person or they hired this kind of thing. So just making sure you're auditing stuff, doing staff training and things around that kind of thing in the first place. Again, a lot of it is make sure it doesn't happen in the first place, but when it inevitably does happen, unfortunately, because of the world we live in, making sure your response is up to scratch.
Yeah.
But these guys are super, super slick at how they've done it. Like, I'll give you a quick example of how sophisticated this is, and not necessarily from the iGaming space, but I was in Vegas and I lifted some money out the card machine to have a shot before I was jumping in my flight, and my phone rung, and the guy's like, is this Craig Campbell? I'm from the Royal Bank of Scotland. I'm like, yeah. He says, did you just pay £487 on booking.com? And I'm like, nope. And he went, all right. I'm like, but my wife might have. Anyway, we get into this conversation. Then he says, right, I'm going to set, just to verify who you are, I'm going to send a code to your phone. So I got the code to the phone, says, right, read out the code to me, gave him the code. Basically, that's him opening up my bank account. He was then able to tell me, confirm stuff about me, but the way it was done, it wasn't some dodgy Indian guy or anything. It was so sophisticated. And after I got off it, when I was on the call, he says, have you got crypto as well? And I'm like, what's that got to do with anything to do with my bank? So I was like, what the fuck's going on? So anyway, I hung up and I phoned my wife and I said, did you book something on booking.com? She's like, no. And I phoned my bank and I'm like, listen, I think I've been done. And they literally had to shut my bank account down. But I'm telling people this, and they're like, Craig, I would expect you to be the other guy on the end of the phone. And I went, it was so polished. It was so polished. I can't believe I gave it, because obviously the bank said to me, Craig, the bank said, never give anyone this PIN over the phone. It clearly states that on the thing. But the way the guy introduced himself and made it sound like he was from the bank, I don't know how it worked, but he hypnotized me and basically got me to give him access to my bank. And that's how sophisticated and polished these guys are. You're not dealing with some crappy little, attempt. Some of this stuff's highly polished. So yeah, it's hiring the right team is is key.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
95% of hacking cases aren't somebody hacking into a computer. They're hacking a person that has the credentials or the privilege to go into that thing, and then they go into their account and they can spread into other accounts and things like that. I might know something about that, unfortunately.
Oh gosh.
It's just social engineering. You could probably, if you're very clever in how to, I mean, I do it all the time. I joked with people, I know something about you, and they spill the beans and you're like, I didn't know shit. Like, they just open up and you're like,
yes,
man, this is easy. Like,
it's human psychology.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think there's a lot of that goes on as well. And you're dealing with people on another level.
Yeah, absolutely. And oftentimes you just like doing random stuff and you get this call, right? You're like caught in a moment, like not even like thinking, right, off the back.
Yep.
So yeah.
That's why I never answer my phone anymore.
Yeah, just say text me. Yes, but so brand protection is really difficult especially in iGaming space, where we deal with so many crazy tactics. What do you think? What would you say to companies? Is it better to build an in-house team or to outsource it?
I come from the hacking background, right?
Yeah.
So there's the number one principle is the principle of least privilege. So you give people as little access to things as possible, right? Yeah. So if the marketing manager, you give them access to an account that controls all of the social media. You don't give them the actual social media credentials, right? Things like that. You try and make sure that you're limited as much as possible so that you protect your brand and you protect this.
I absolutely agree with them. You don't want the least amount of people having access to your brand assets is absolutely the right way to do it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you answered that question.
Yeah.
The brand protection.
But yeah, in terms of the brand protection, you've got to try and get someone that knows what they're doing first and foremost. And obviously not everyone has the skills or expertise in-house. And is that something you can outsource to other people? Yes, by all means do. You have to consider who you outsource it to. They've got to be trusted. They've got to be skilled and experienced. But, Otis do offer brand protection services, and that is something that is a big need in the iGaming space. A lot of people have problems, and at Otis, they want to provide solutions to those problems, and that is a big one. Not even just from the cybersecurity issue, but also you just don't want your competition being able to come in and easily, take advantage of your brand, or even affiliates being able to come in and just dominate the setup for your brand name. That's something you want to try and protect against as well, because you're hemorrhaging money out the door at that point as well. So I think overall, brand protection covers not just the cybersecurity thing, but leaving money on the table or allowing your competition to come in and take advantage of your brand as well. So I think that's a service that Odys can provide, and is a problem for many people in the iGaming space. They don't often consider that. They often become obsessed with other things, such as whether it be their sportsbook or their casino or all these kind of terms, and they leave that on the table, and you're like, God, do the basics first. Make sure you dominate that. So yeah, you can come to Odys if you're struggling with that. We do have a solution to that problem. So
It's and alternatively, it's really hard to source people who know what they're doing in iGaming space that is so competitive, right?
listen, I think Charles will probably agree. Most of the people out there who do SEO in general, some of them are good at maybe local or stuff like that, but they're not thinking about all of these other things that we've just discussed there, and they don't understand why as well. They're maybe used to doing it for local plumbers, and there's probably a very small percentage of people who actually have the experience or the knowledge or the kind of thought process to think that deeply about it. And I know Charles has always been a deep thinker in all of these kind of weird and wonderful strategies, and that's what I like about the iGaming space. That is the next level competition. It's like if you're playing football or whatever, you want to play at the highest level possible with the people who've got the best technical abilities. And operating in SEO, you want to be able to try and compete at the highest level possible, and that does require a bit more thought and strategy and a bit more technical expertise. Or if you don't have that technical expertise, make sure that you've got someone that does have that.
Yep, I agree.
Awesome.
Nothing really to add to that.
So let's go back to the tactics we discussed before. We talked about links, we talked about parasite SEO. I wanted to ask you about the comeback of the PBNs. As you said, they're back. Can you share can you share some examples of how you used them recently?
I mean, PBNs is PBNs. You've got to take advantage of what was previously there. PBNs haven't actually died as far as I'm concerned. I've always still liked them. A lot of people, the SEO community sometimes say things and it's not wholly accurate. There's a lot of people who have public blog networks and they sell their links on it. For me, that's not a PBN. Have I always taken advantage of an expired domain or an aged domain and used it as a linkable asset? Absolutely. And, again, it's topically relevant. You're repurposing something that was already there. You can even add to it. You can build it out. And, a lot of people, when they're looking at links, they want links from websites that are relevant, that have high DR, that have traffic, all of these kind of things. And these are things that you control. And I like Charles was talking about earlier with the brand thing, you want to be able to control that stuff. And I can control the fact that he can't get on my PBNs if I don't want him to as well. So you've got that kind of, you control the assets type of thing. And I think that, in addition, I'm not saying PBNs is the link building strategy. It's always been like the kind of icing on top of the cake, if you like. It's not something I would say, go out there and just build PBN after PBN after PBN. Do everything you can, get up to your DR 73, 75, whatever you need to be at, and then start to kind of, that's the icing on top of the cake. So they've always been there. They've always worked very, very well. They're not something that I would be selling to every Tom, Dick and Harry. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes I see people who have these assets. They're just selling links on them for, whatever their prices are. And it's just a money-making exercise. And then before you look at it, they've got 200,000 outbound links on it. And, the value that's getting squeezed out of that is virtually nothing. So, but I've always been a massive fan.
Yeah, same. I'm a pretty big fan of PBNs as well. Generally speaking, we use them for tier 2 links. and local SEO, and that's basically it. Like, we don't really employ them for tier 1 links that much, just because of risk factors and things like that. And we're competing in really high competition niches, and they will report you as soon as they see a PBN and Ahrefs, that's getting sent to Google. So we try and make sure that we limit however much reporting can be done against us, and make sure that Google doesn't get information through SEO's obvious research methods.
How do you do that?
So generally speaking, when people analyze your link profile, they don't go beyond your link profile. They don't look at, okay, you have a link from Glamour magazine, let's go and look at that link's links, right?
Okay.
And that's where you can use the tier 2s and things like that, because you get away from it. You get away with it quite easily. For local SEO, they're really, really good, because you can buy geo-specific domain names. So let's say you want to rank in New York, you have a local SEO in New York. You can go and buy loads of expired native domains for New York, build a relevant PBN for New York, and now you can rank basically anything in that city, because you have links that can link to anything that's relevant to New York. So it makes that really powerful. And if you have a local agency, I think all local agencies should, if they're serving a specific area, should be trying to build a PBN for that area. Just because, especially when you're dealing with clients like concrete driveways or some random stuff like that, HVAC and things like that, those kind of sites are actually, it's not that easy to go and build links to them anyway. So it's sometimes better to just go and get the links that you can automatically pull from. I also think, again, because you can reuse them, they're a lot more profitable than basically any other link type. So other links, you spend $200 to get that link. You can build a PBN for $200, and you can link 20, 30 times.
Yeah, that's the thing. The cost of a link's 200 quid, but you can build a PBN for 200 quid. Go to Surf Ninja or whatever, they can churn out a website for fucking $54. So
I think competitive niches like iGaming, would you, for example, think about like blocking Ahrefs bots and other tools bots from accessing?
I never block bots on anything, just because I think, again, that's another way for people to find you, another way for Google to be like, why are you blocking the bots? And all of these things in general. And we found anyway that Ahrefs, for example, now is using the Yep bot anyway. So even if you block Ahrefs, they're still going to get your data from Yep anyway. So it doesn't really matter. I think, again, and it's also a sign, if you go and look in Ahrefs and there's no data for a website because they're blocking bots, SEOs are like, okay, well, I'm going to go and put this in Systrix. I'm going to go and find something that they're not blocking the bot on, and I'm going to find the data anyway. Or you can use Google itself. You can use Google operators to go and find the stuff that people are hiding. So we use that a lot. I have a YouTube video from about 10 years ago, which is basically how to find hidden PBNs, and it looks at you can do like RSS feed manipulation, you can do search operators, you can do all sorts of things to kind of find these PBNs, even if they are blocking bots and hiding them from the link profile.
If someone wants to find it, they'll find it. So there's no point. It's just another footprint.
Exactly.
So
footprint as much as you can.
Okay. Yeah, there are different perspectives, so it's interesting to
I mean, there are guys that are obsessed with doing it, blocking all the bots and stuff like that.
Yes,
they think
there are people like that.
They think they're special and doing something that's crazy. I think that would be very easy for Google to go, right, grab this and see all of the websites that have got that on it, and
they're definitely special.
Yeah,
but just in a different way.
So what about repurposed domains? I heard they're getting trendy. How do you repurpose a domain, and why would you do it?
Yeah, so repurposing domains is, well, number one, the reason you would do it is because you can get really powerful domains for niches that you can rank in that you don't necessarily get that same level of domain from, or it's going to be a lot more expensive. So let's say in iGaming, for example, if you want to get an iGaming DR50, you're probably talking tens of thousands of dollars, right? But if you want to get a video game DR50, you're talking maybe $200. So you can go and get that domain, repurpose it. And again, repurposing is not that easy. A lot of people mess it up completely and don't do it properly at all. But there's some really good examples in iGaming of entire SERPs that are just completely taken over by expired and repurposed domains, basically. If you look at non-GamStop casinos in the UK, so you literally search non-GamStop casinos, the entire SERP is just expired or repurposed domains right now. So you can go and look at it now. Yeah.
How do you do it correctly? Can you share some tips? Yeah.
So if you want to repurpose your domain, there's 3 things you kind of have to do. The first one is making sure that Google indexes the new content and understands that it is a new version of the site. So a lot of people don't register it in GSC. So you have to do a GSC registration, you have to get it indexed, you have to do all this kind of stuff. Then once you've actually gotten Google to understand that it's a new website, you have to build new links at it. You can't have the old links and things going to it to 100% power it. You have to get some new links for, again, Google to understand it's a new variant. And then the third thing is kind of how you set up the domain and stuff, but that's a bit more secret sauce that we have to
Yeah, you have to contact us off camera.
or just as a service.
Yeah, email me, Charles, Craig. We know people. Yes, awesome. When you are searching for an age domain and want to use it, typically it should be relevant. But I know in iGaming, such competitive niche, people have pulled off irrelevant expired domains or age domains. Do you know of such examples? Can you share?
I just said. I
could literally tell you. I was with, I'm not going to name his name, it's not fair to do that, but he was on the phone to that guy, Matt Tricott, a few years ago, who sells domains, and he literally phoned up and Matt, I knew what Matt had. It was like 28, and there was builders on there, roofers, plumbers, and the iGaming guy just went, I'll take the fucking lot. Just took the fucking lot. Didn't matter a shit what he took. He just took the whole lot, and built websites on them and tried to repurpose them and do his thing. How successful that was, I am not entirely sure, but people buy up anything, and I certainly still see people buying up anything.
That's crazy. Yeah, because your example about the video games, it's somewhat like maybe not super in the field, right? But somewhat connected, right? But like
you can have esports betting and
exactly. These are next to each other, but like something totally off.
For me, people say like, what is relevance? Like the way that Google categorize your website is not the way that you would think. You don't necessarily have to get another casino to be relevant. Absolutely not. You know, whether it be sports or video games or stuff like that, is that somewhat relevant? Absolutely. And in my opinion, it's somewhat relevant. You know, people think it has to be exactly that. You know, even again, out with the iGaming space, if you're a roofer, you want someone that does home improvements to link to. You're not necessarily going to get other roofers. That means, you know, dropping all the time or whatever. But there's going to be people in construction, and that's what you want. You don't want to be, you don't want a florist or something like that. You know, it's just not, well, you could maybe even argue that a florist is relevant, you know, with the garden and stuff, but, you know, you could probably do that. But, you know, a lot of people think too much of relevance and trying to hyper focus on it. And I think you can be slightly looser, but like I say, the other guy, you know, buying up roofer stuff and things like that, for me, that's too loose. I think you're, but whether it works or not, it's a different argument. Only he would be able to answer that. But I always try and, you know, I think with PBNs and everything else, I try and focus as much as I can on relevance, because we can get generic news websites and you know, all of the other kind of links that we can get. But, you know, the good, top, powerful, relevant ones are the ones that we always struggle to get. And that's where my focus would be when grabbing age domains.
And relevancy is thought of generally in human thinking, right? Like you just did it there, where you're like, you can connect gardening to floristry and things like that, right? But it's an algorithm. So relevancy is linear, literally. It's this is connected to this in a line, and there's maybe some things connected here. So you have to look at relevancy from how Google views it. And generally speaking, it's very weird. It's kind of all over the place, and there's connections here and connections over here, and the entities are all over the shop. When I think of irrelevant domain names in iGaming, I would say the number one domain that I see is former charity domains. So they used to be charities, and because charities get links all day, every day, and it's very easy to get links for a charity, when those charities eventually, you know, die or whatever happens to them, their domain goes expired, or they get auctioned off or something like that. And iGaming tends to pick up those domains every day, all day, and rank them for
charity domains.
Yes.
Favorite domains for iGaming.
Literally, I think the number one thing, I think, from what I see anyway in the SERPs for ranking, in the SERPs, charity domains seem to be the number one thing for some reason. I bet you see all sorts. You see like hotel domains, you see restaurant domains, you see literally
Yeah.
everything. But that was probably the number one thing I see.
Whatever has good backlink profile. right?
Exactly, yeah.
Because when you are searching for such a domain, what other things do you check apart from the backlink profile? What
Yeah,
should you check?
Wayback Machine, spam scores, domain age history, domain who is ownership, registrars, who they were registered with, if they've changed registrars, if there was any what's it called, any GSE hits and things that you can view if the domain is not expired and things and stuff.